The studio corner. The young actress trapped. John Wayne walked 3 steps, said nothing, and the man with all the power went silent. It was June 1974. The backlot at Warner Brothers. Another Western being made. Another day of dust and horses and men pretending to be tougher than they were. The sun hung low and harsh over the false front buildings, casting long shadows across the dirt. John Wayne was 67 years old. He'd been making movies for 45 years. He'd survived lung cancer 3 years earlier, lost a lung and a rib to the surgery, came back thinner and slower but still working. Still standing. Still John Wayne. He was between takes, standing near his trailer, reading through tomorrow's script pages. The set was in that peculiar state of controlled chaos that happens during production. Crew members moving equipment, extras in costume milling around, assistant directors shouting into walkie-talkies. Wayne looked up from his script. In the corner of the set, near the false saloon facade, he saw something that made him stop reading. A young actress, maybe 23, 24 years old, stood with her back nearly against the wooden wall. She was in costume, a simple period dress, her script clutched in both hands against her chest like a shield. Her eyes were wide. Her body language screamed discomfort. Standing in front of her, very close, was Martin Kessler, executive producer. 52 years old. Expensive suit despite the dust. One hand on the wall beside the actress's head. Leaning in. Talking quietly. The universal posture of a man using physical space to intimidate. Wayne watched for exactly 3 seconds. The actress tried to step sideways. Kessler moved with her, maintaining the distance, maintaining the trap. Still talking. Still smiling, that smile that didn't reach his eyes. Wayne closed his script, placed it carefully on the chair beside him, and started walking. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He crossed the 30 feet of open set ground in complete silence. His boots on the dirt made no sound. His face showed nothing, no anger, no urgency, just that familiar Wayne expression of absolute focus. The crew members nearest to him noticed first. A gaffer setting up a light stopped and watched. An assistant director started to say something, then didn't. One of the stunt guys nudged another and pointed. Wayne kept walking. Kessler didn't see him coming. He was too focused on the young actress, too absorbed in whatever he was saying to her, too confident in his power to notice the shift in the atmosphere around him. The actress saw Wayne first. Her eyes moved past Kessler's shoulder. Her expression changed, confusion, then hope, then relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. Kessler noticed her expression change. He started to turn. Wayne stepped into the space. Not aggressive. Not touching anyone. He simply positioned himself between Kessler and the actress, his considerable frame creating an impenetrable wall, his presence filling the corner like a physical force. And he stood there. Silent. Looking down at Martin Kessler with those pale blue eyes that had stared down 1,000 movie villains, and were now focused on a real one. Kessler stumbled backward. Actually stumbled. One foot catching on the other as he scrambled to create distance, his carefully maintained composure shattering in an instant. Duke, we were just, she and I were discussing. Wayne said nothing. Didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stood there with his arms at his sides and his jaw set and his entire being radiating a message that needed no words. You're done here. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. The entire corner of the set had gone quiet. Crew members had stopped working. The assistant directors had stopped shouting. Everyone was watching. Kessler's face went red. Then pale. His hands, which had been so confident against that wall, now hung uselessly at his sides. I don't appreciate. This is my production, you can't just. Wayne's right eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. That was all. Kessler took another step backward. Then another. Then he turned and walked quickly toward the production trailers, his expensive shoes kicking up dust, his dignity in tatters. Wayne waited until Kessler was completely gone. Then he turned to the young actress, who was still standing against the wall, still clutching her script, tears now streaming silently down her face. "You all right, miss?" Wayne's voice was quiet, gentle in a way that contradicted everything about his physical presence. She nodded, unable to speak. "What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Mitchell." Her voice barely above a whisper. Wayne nodded slowly. "Miss Mitchell, I want you to go find wardrobe. Tell them you need a few minutes. Get yourself some water. When you're ready, you come back out here and we'll run this scene properly. Take your time." "Thank you," she managed. "I didn't know how to," he said. "If I didn't." "I know." Wayne's voice was still quiet, still gentle, but there was steel underneath. "And it's done now. You understand?" "It's done." She nodded again, wiped her eyes, and walked quickly toward the wardrobe trailer. Wayne stood alone in the corner for a moment. The crew members nearby were still watching, uncertain what to do or say. Wayne looked at them, at the gaffer, at the assistant directors, at the stunt guys. "Someone needs to talk to production," he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach them. "Mr. Kessler won't be on set anymore. Not around the actors. Not around the crew. If there's a problem with that, they can call my agent." The first assistant director, a man named Tommy Chin who'd worked with Wayne on 4 pictures, stepped forward. "Duke, Kessler's the executive producer. He can fire all of us. He can shut down the picture." Wayne looked at him. "Then let him try. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. To understand what happened next, you need to understand where John Wayne was in his life in 1974. He was dying. He didn't talk about it. Didn't complain. But he knew. The cancer they'd removed in 1964 had been only the beginning. He could feel it, the weakness in his remaining lung, the way stares left him breathless, the nights when pain kept him awake despite the pills. He'd made 160 movies. He'd played every kind of hero Hollywood could imagine. He'd become an icon, a myth, a symbol of American masculinity and strength. But he'd also carried guilt his entire career. Guilt that gnawed at him in quiet moments. Guilt that no amount of success or fame could erase. John Wayne had never served in the military. When World War II started, he was 34 years old, married with 4 children, and already a successful movie star. He had every legal deferment available. The studio wanted him making movies, not fighting. His family needed him home. But while he was on sound stages in California playing soldiers and cowboys, real men, younger men, better men, he sometimes thought, "We're dying on beaches in Normandy and jungles in the Pacific." For the rest of his life, Wayne would be haunted by that choice. He'd spend decades making war movies, playing military heroes, supporting veteran causes, trying to honor in fiction what he'd failed to do in reality. He'd visit hospitals. He'd sit with wounded soldiers. He'd shake hands and sign autographs and tell young men they were the real heroes, not him. Never him. And in quiet moments, alone in his trailer between takes, he'd wonder if anything he did would ever make up for not being there when it mattered. So when John Wayne saw a young woman being cornered by a man who had power and was using it to hurt someone weaker, something fundamental shifted in him. He couldn't go back and fight in a war he'd missed. He couldn't undo the choices of 1942. But he could stand in a corner of a film set in 1974 and do what was right when it was needed. Maybe that wouldn't balance the scales. Maybe it wouldn't earn him redemption. But it was what he could do. Right now. Today. Away from the cameras, Wayne made a choice no one expected. 2 hours after the incident, Wayne was called to a meeting in one of the production offices. Kessler was there. The director. 2 studio executives from Warner Brothers. The film's primary investor. They told Wayne that what happened was unfortunate, but that Kessler was essential to the production. They suggested that perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. They implied that if Wayne made this an issue, it could jeopardize not just this film but future projects. Wayne listened to all of it in silence. Sitting in a chair that was slightly too small for his frame, his cowboy hat on the table in front of him, his hands folded calmly in his lap. When they finished, he spoke. "I've been making pictures for 45 years," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I've worked with good men and bad men. I've seen how this business works. I know what you're asking me to do." They waited. "And I'm telling you no." The studio executive leaned forward. "Duke, be reasonable. This is... Either Kessler stays off the set when actors are present, or I walk." Wayne's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. "That young lady, Sarah Mitchell, she gets a letter of apology. She gets a guarantee that he won't come near her again. And every actress and every crew member on this picture gets told that if they have a problem, they come to me or they come to Tommy Chin, and it'll be handled. No retaliation. No career consequences. You can't dictate." "I just did." Wayne stood up slowly, his considerable height making everyone else in the room suddenly seem small. "I'm too old and too tired to pretend I don't see what I saw today. You want to fire me, that's your right. You want to sue me, go ahead. But I'm not working on a set where that man has power over young people who can't defend themselves." He picked up his hat, placed it carefully on his head, looked at each person in the room in turn. "Tomorrow morning, I'll be in my trailer at 6 a.m. for makeup. If this production is still happening and Kessler agrees to my terms, I'll be there. If not, you'll have my resignation in writing by noon." He walked out. The next morning, Wayne arrived at 6 a.m. as promised. Martin Kessler was not on set. He would remain on the production, in name only, working from an office in Burbank, never again setting foot near the actors or crew. Sarah Mitchell received a formal letter. The cast and crew were quietly informed of the new policy. The movie finished production on schedule. Wayne never spoke publicly about what happened. Neither did anyone else involved. But something changed on that set. The atmosphere. The way people treated each other. The understanding that someone with real power had used it to protect someone without it. But what followed would stay with everyone who witnessed it, forever. Sarah Mitchell finished the film. It was a small role, she had maybe 15 lines total. The movie itself was moderately successful. Not a classic, not a failure. It faded into Wayne's enormous filmography, just another Western in a career full of them. But Sarah Mitchell never forgot. 20 years later, in 1994, she was a successful acting coach in Los Angeles, teaching young performers. She'd had a decent career, some TV work, a few small film roles, nothing that made her famous but enough to make a living doing what she loved. One of her students asked her once what the most important thing she'd learned in the business was. Sarah thought for a long moment. Then she told them about a day in 1974 when she was 24 years old and terrified and trapped in a corner, and John Wayne walked 3 steps and changed everything. "He didn't give me a big speech," she said. "He didn't tell me to be strong or fight back or report it to someone. He just stood there, between me and the danger. And by standing there, by being willing to risk his career and his reputation, he taught me something I've never forgotten." "What?" the student asked. "That real strength isn't about being the toughest or the loudest or the most powerful. Real strength is about standing between the weak and the strong when it costs you something. And he was willing to lose everything that day. For me. For someone he didn't know." John Wayne died 5 years later, in 1979. Cancer finally won the fight he'd been waging in silence. At his funeral, among the hundreds of people who came to pay respects, there was a young woman who stood in the back and cried quietly. Sarah Mitchell. She carried with her a single photograph, a candid shot from that 1974 Western, taken by a set photographer. Wayne standing in that corner, his back to the camera, his presence filling the frame. She'd kept it for 5 years. She would keep it for the rest of her life. In her acting classes, she kept that photograph on her desk. When students asked about it, she would tell them the story. Not about John Wayne the movie star. About John Wayne the man who walked 3 steps and stood still. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. The lesson was simple. Power used to protect is the only power worth having. And sometimes doing the right thing is as quiet as standing in a corner and refusing to move. Wayne never spoke about that day. But everyone who was there remembered. And they told others. And the story lived on, not in headlines or official records, but in the quiet knowledge that once, when it mattered, a man stood where he was needed. That's the real Duke. Not the myth. Not the movies. Just the man who knew when to walk 3 steps and say nothing at all.